Hello everybody, what's up and welcome back. If you're new here, I'm Liz, your host here at Crimes Untold, and today we're going to be talking about the second DADT murder that I referred to in my previous video. We're going to be talking about the murder of Alan R. Schindler Jr. So this actually happened in Japan. His murder happened in Japan. He was an E4 radioman, third class from the Navy, and he was stationed in Nagasaki, Japan. One day, he's in the park in Sasebo, and goes to the bathroom. Terry M. Helvey and Charles E. Vins follow him into the bathroom, and they proceed to stomp him to death. They're the ones that killed him. This murder was the initial kickoff of the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. So there was a witness to this murder. His name is Jonathan Witt. He saw the act, and after he saw what was happening, Helvey and Vins ran from the bathroom. This is when Witt called the shore patrolmen for help to aid Schindler, or to aid in this person because he didn't know who it was, unfortunately. Who was actually, he was struggling to breathe and he was bleeding from the mouth. So they weren't able to initially recognize him due to his extensive injuries, but they were able to determine who it was due to the tattoos on his arms, unfortunately. So this man, his injuries included 8 broken ribs, his head was crushed, his face was crushed, he had a broken upper jaw, his eye globes were ruptured and burst. The middle part of his face, so right here, was completely detached from his skull and it was free floating. His brain was bruised, his lungs were bruised, his heart was bruised, his pericardial sac around his heart was filled with 250 milliliters of blood. His liver looked like it was a smushed tomato. His bladder was ruptured and ripped open. His aorta was torn by blows to the chest by blunt force trauma that exceeded 20 G-force. That's a lot of force on this man. And also his penis had been lacerated and was bruised. It literally looks like he was stomped by a horse or in a high-speed car crash. He was harassed and killed because of his sexual orientation, which is very sad. Obviously, we have this detrimental murder that happens across seas. He's stationed over there, and this is a ridiculous murder. This murder actually inspired the movie Any Mother's Son, which won a GLAAD award or GLAAD Media Award. And this award recognizes and honors different branches of media for their representation of the LGBTQIA community, which is very nice that they retold what happened, because this murder is complete nonsense. Complete nonsense. Now, he served in the Navy for 4 years from 1988 to 1992 when he died on October 27th of 1992. He was very young. He was only 22 years old. And he was a radioman on the USS San Jose, on the USS Midway, and he was also on the assault ship, the USS Below, Bellewood, which is in Sasebo, Nagasaki, where he was serving during the time of his murder. Now, he had complained about being harassed to the chain of command in March and in April of that year, so they knew what was happening. They also knew about certain things that were happening to him, and of like things that were happening. Somebody glued his locker shut on one of the boats, which makes no sense why they would do that. And he dealt with frequent comments from other people on the boat of calling him out because of his orientation, saying you should die because of what you like, things like that. And Alan complained about what was happening, but nobody listened to him. By September, he literally couldn't handle it anymore, and he requested to see his captain, but his request was denied, which is unfortunate. And while he was en route to San Diego, well, from San Diego to Sasebo on the USS Bellewood, it made a short stop in Pearl Harbor en route to Japan. And he ended up broadcasting a statement which said, "Too cute to be straight." And this was on some of the lines, the secure lines that would reach most of the Pacific Fleet. So he kind of did something pretty bad. On the 24th of September, he ended up meeting with the executive officer for the ship. And at this meeting, the chaplain was present. Allen formally said that he was indeed homosexual and requested to be transferred and wanted a discharge from his post. He then informed his CO, which was Captain Douglas Bratt, and the legal officer for the ship, Captain Meyer, about all this. He then was told that his discharge would be processing. It could take up to 2 weeks, but they also told him he had to remain on the ship until his discharge was finished. So Allen knew that his safety was an issue. He did decide to obey orders, but he knew that he would suffer consequences for wanting to be discharged, for wanting to leave the ship, things like that. And the next day, he would end up being called to the mast for the captain about that radio message that he sent out, the too cute to be straight. And he requested that this hearing to be closed, but his captain, nope, it was open. Anybody could come in. There was about 300 people that attended this, and Allen made no admission in the public that he was gay during this. Some of the people that were present took it upon themselves of, hey, I can harass him because, he's being talked about some broadcast that says too cute to be straight. He then would be reduced in rank. Allen would be reduced in rank from RM1 to RM3, and he was placed on a 30-day restriction upon the ship. He couldn't leave the ship until a few weeks after getting to Sasebo, which was approximately 4 days prior to him actually dying, which is very sad. The other thing that's also really sad, that when I read it, I was like, when Jonathan Witt, the witness, saw Helvey repeatedly stomp Allen, Helvey was singing. Doesn't say about what, but he was singing. There also was a second witness to this attack too. His name is Keith Sims, and he was Allen's friend, but he couldn't recognize him because of the injuries on his body. So following the murder of Allen, the Navy didn't release a lot of details about the killing to his mother, Dorothy Hades Clausen, or to the media. They also failed to include any of his personal belongings to give to his mother, which included his logbook of when he was on board, the record of harassment he was receiving. None of that was released to his mother, and it should have been. Following his murder as well, the Navy denied that they received any complaints from him, and they absolutely refused to talk about this case, which irritates me because they knew that he was being harassed and did nothing about it. Hence why don't ask, don't tell. Now, Keith Sims stated that he was one of the ones that reported Vins and Helvey to Captain Meyer, but nothing was done in response. And this was before the murder. In present time, there was a documentary that came out in 2019, and in the documentary, Jonathan Witt said that he had been threatened by Captain Bratt and the Belleau Wood executive officer in regards to this murder. They probably threatened him to not say anything in regards to the murder of Allen. So in 2015, 23 years, in 2015, 23 years after the murder of Allen, that's when a 900-page report was released by the Navy following the Freedom of Information Act, because following repeated requests due to the Freedom of Information Act, a 900-page report was released from the Navy admitting to the harassment of Alan Schindler. It said that Alan Schindler was yet another homosexual man killed and forgotten. This is that was something that an activist, Michael Petrellis, said. He's a famous LGBTQIA rights activist that said this in regards to the report released by the Navy. So 23 years following his death, it took them 23 years to finally share all the details of his murder. And following this, they fully honored his memory on Veterans Day of 2015, because in order to grow in society, you need to be able to get over certain things, and the government is extremely homophobic, and they played a part in covering up his murder. There was a full wake held on November 7th of 1992 in his hometown of Chicago Heights, Illinois, and he was buried with full honors. So the day prior to this, on November 6th, his family was called down to the funeral home, and his mother requested that his coffin stay open. The Navy told her not to, but she said she wanted to see her sailor in his dress blues, and even he didn't look anything like the boy she had last given a kiss goodbye to 2 months earlier. At the wake as well, his sister Kathy also asked that the coffin be opened again. And like I mentioned, they could only identify him from the tattoos on his arms because he was so disfigured. So Helvey ended up pleading guilty to unpremeditated murder, but he denied killing Alan. And Vins had a plea bargain. So Vins ended up serving 78 days, just 78 days prior to a general discharge from the Navy, which irks me so much. Completely irks me. And Helvey is still imprisoned. As of right now, he is housed at the FCI Greenville in Illinois under the inmate number of 13867-045. And like I mentioned, this topic of don't ask, don't tell is very touchy when it comes to certain cases, when it comes to crimes on pride, because a lot of people don't like talking about it. A lot of people have a hard time dealing with the subject matter of this. So it's one of those things where you're like, do I, don't I? Do I, don't I? But that, my friends, is the second Don't Ask, Don't Tell case that I wanted to discuss here on this channel. So I hope you guys learned something from this, and I'll see you guys in my next one.